Story 1. The Last Night Shift. At Tan Lap District Hospital, everyone knew there was one place you should never go after midnight, the morgue cold room. I used to think it was just a scare story for new employees. Until the night I took Hoa's shift. Hua had worked at the morgue for nearly 10 years. Thin, pale, always smelling faintly of disinfectant. That night, he called me around 9 p.m., his voice hoarse. "Min, can you cover my shift tonight?" I asked what happened. There was a long silence before he finally said, "I'm not going into that cold room anymore." I laughed. "You've worked there for 10 years. What are you afraid of?" Hua didn't laugh. He only said one sentence that made my spine go cold. "Someone in there has been calling my name for 3 nights." I thought he was drunk or hallucinating from lack of sleep. Even though I hated the morgue, I still agreed. The night shift paid better. And I needed the money. Around 10:30 p.m., I arrived at the hospital. The morgue was behind the emergency ward, completely separated from the patient buildings. The path leading there was narrow, lined with old XACU trees on both sides. The yellow lights flickered weakly, barely illuminating the road. The wind rustled the leaves, sounding like whispers. The old security guard frowned when he saw me. "You're working the morgue tonight?" I nodded. He stared at me for a moment before speaking quietly. "If you hear knocking from the cold room, don't open it." I forced a smile. How could dead people knock? The guard said nothing. He only lowered his head and lit a cigarette, his hand trembling slightly. The morgue had 3 rooms: the reception room, the paperwork room, and the cold room at the very end. The cold room had a thick steel door with a temperature gauge outside that always stayed below 0. Inside were long stainless steel drawers, each containing a body. I picked up the shift logbook from the table. That night there were 4 bodies inside. An old man who died of a stroke. A man from a traffic accident. A young woman whose family had not yet arrived. And an 8-year-old boy who drowned in the canal behind the market. When I reached the last line, I noticed Hua had written in red ink, "Drawer number 7 must not be opened." I frowned. There were only 4 bodies listed, placed in drawers 2, 4, 5, and 9. There was no drawer number 7. I assumed Hua had made a mistake. Around 11:45 p.m., the hospital became completely quiet. Even the ambulance sirens grew infrequent. I sat in the duty room, made myself a strong coffee, and scrolled through my phone to stay awake. At exactly 12:03 a.m., I heard knocking. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came from the direction of the cold room. I looked up. Silence. I told myself it was probably the refrigeration system or the metal contracting from the cold. I had worked in hospitals long enough to know morgues made strange noises sometimes. But then the knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. Clearer this time. Like someone was knocking from inside a stainless steel drawer. I stood up, my heart pounding. I remembered the guard's warning. "If you hear knocking from the cold room, don't open it." I tried to ignore it. But then a voice echoed from behind the steel door. Very soft. Very hoarse. "Min." I froze. No one down there knew my name except Hua, the security guard, and a few staff members. I looked around, thinking someone was pranking me. But the hallway outside was empty. The voice came again. "Min, it's cold?" Goosebumps spread across my skin. I stepped backward, nearly knocking over my coffee. I kept trying to calm myself. Maybe it was the wind, the machines, or an echo from the hospital speakers. But I knew perfectly well there were no speakers in the cold room. The walls were insulated, the steel door sealed shut. Then the knocking became frantic. Knock, 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 knock. As if someone inside was pounding desperately on the metal drawer. I picked up the cold room key, then put it back down. Sweat ran down my spine despite the freezing room. I called Hua. The phone rang for a long time before he answered. Before I could speak, he asked, "It called your name, didn't it?" I went speechless. "You know what this is?" Hua breathed heavily. "Min, listen to me, no matter what you hear. Do not open drawer number 7. But there is no drawer number 7 on the list. That's exactly why you must not open it." I stared toward the cold room door. Inside, The knocking suddenly stopped. A long silence followed. Then I heard metal sliding. Screech, screech, screech. Like a stainless steel drawer slowly pulling itself open. I went rigid. The cold room door was still locked. No one could possibly be inside. But that sound definitely came from within. Wah shouted through the phone. "Get out of there now." Before I could react, the lights in the duty room went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Only the faint green glow from the temperature gauge outside the cold room remained. -2 degrees. -4. -8. The temperature was dropping unnaturally fast. Cold air seeped through the cracks under the door like fog crawling along the floor. My breath turned white in the darkness. From inside the cold room, the voice returned. This time it no longer sounded like one person. It sounded like many overlapping voices. "Min, open the door?" I backed toward the exit, but the doorknob wouldn't turn. Locked. I was certain I hadn't locked it earlier. The sound of metal drawers sliding echoed again. Screech, screech, screech. Then something heavy hit the floor. Thud. As if something had fallen from a table onto the tiles. I pounded on the door and called for the security guard. No answer. My phone lost signal. The screen displayed only one strange sentence. "Do not enter the cold room." Terrified, I threw the phone onto the table. At that exact moment, the steel door of the cold room clicked. The lock released itself. The door opened slightly. A cloud of white freezing air drifted out. Inside the dark gap, I saw a hand. A pale, waterlogged hand with bruised fingernails gripping the edge of the door. Then a child's voice whispered, "Mister, I'm not dead yet." I recognized it immediately. It was the drowned boy's voice. My body trembled as I stepped closer. Logic told me to run, but the instinct of a hospital worker pulled me toward the door. What if the child was still alive? What if the death certificate was wrong? I opened the door. The moment I did, I knew I had made a mistake. Inside the cold room was darker than usual. The ceiling lights were off, only weak hallway light spilled inside. Rows of stainless steel drawers reflected my distorted shadow. Drawer number 7 was open, but empty. On the floor before it were black wet streaks leading deeper into the room. I stepped inside. Each footstep echoed hollowly. "Is anyone there?" No answer. I turned on my phone flashlight. Drawer 2. The old man was still there. Drawer 4. The traffic accident victim. Drawer 5. The young woman. Drawer 9. The drowned boy. All still present. So whose child's voice had I heard? I turned to run. The cold room door slammed shut. Bang! I rushed toward it, pulling desperately, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like someone outside was holding it closed. Then behind me. Breathing. Very close. Warm breath against the back of my neck. I slowly turned around. A woman stood between the rows of drawers. Her long wet hair covered her face. Her torn hospital gown was stained with dark patches. Her belly was swollen like she was pregnant. I recognized her instantly. The young woman from drawer number 5. But drawer number 5 was still closed. I shined my flashlight toward it. Still shut. So what was standing before me? The woman raised her head. Beneath the wet hair, her eyes were completely white. Her mouth slowly opened. "Where is my child?" I couldn't answer. She stepped forward. Black water dripped from beneath her feet. "You hid my baby in drawer number 7. I backed into the freezing metal drawers. She pointed at me. "Give my child back." Right behind me, drawer number 7 made a sound. Knock, knock, knock. I spun around. From inside the empty drawer came the cry of a newborn baby. Weak. Distant. As if echoing from underground. I completely lost control. I screamed, slammed against the door, called Wah, called the guard, called anyone who might hear me. The woman kept approaching. "Give my child back." Suddenly, the lights in the cold room flickered on. I collapsed to the floor. The door burst open. The security guard and 2 nurses rushed in and dragged me out. I barely remember what I said. I only remember that before they pulled me away, I looked back one last time. Drawer number 7 was still open. And inside, something wrapped in white cloth was lying there, moving. The next morning, the police arrived. They reviewed old morgue records and uncovered a hidden incident from 12 years earlier. A pregnant woman had died during emergency surgery. The baby was declared dead inside her womb. But when both bodies were taken to the morgue, a night orderly heard faint crying from the cold room. He panicked, afraid of responsibility, afraid the hospital would be investigated, afraid of losing his job. So he told no one. The baby was left inside drawer number 7. By the time anyone opened it, it was too late. Since then, drawer number 7 was never used again. The records were erased. Everyone who knew the truth either retired or died. Wah knew because the orderly had been his father. Before dying, his father told him, "Never open drawer number 7. Things may freeze to death in the cold, but hatred never freezes." After that night, I transferred out of the hospital. Wah quit completely. And 1 month later, the security guard was found unconscious outside the morgue, mumbling repeatedly. The baby is still crying. Later, the hospital renovated the morgue. They replaced all the drawers, demolished drawer number 7, rebuilt the walls, even changed the electrical system. But night shift workers still whisper the same thing. At exactly 12:03 a.m., the cold room temperature drops by itself. Then knocking comes from behind the steel door. Knock, knock, knock. And if a new employee doesn't know the story, they will hear a small child's voice whisper, "Mister, I'm so cold. I don't know whether the story is true anymore." I only know that after that night, every time I pass a cold room, whether it's a freezer, a supermarket storage room, or a hospital morgue, I hear metal sliding behind me. Screech, screech, screech. Like a stainless steel drawer opening. And something in the darkness is waiting for me to come back. Story 2. The Unidentified Corpse. I used to work as a body transport driver for the city hospital. Not many people lasted long in that job. Not because it was physically difficult, but because the things people saw after midnight were often impossible to talk about. I worked there for nearly 3 years before quitting. It all started with an unidentified corpse. That night was at the end of November. Heavy rain poured outside. Around 1 a.m., the emergency department called me down to the basement to transfer a body into the morgue. When I arrived, 2 nurses were standing outside the hallway. Neither of them stepped inside. I asked, "Why hasn't the body been moved yet?" One young nurse looked at me strangely. "You go in yourself?" Confused, I pushed the stretcher inside. Only one body lay in the middle of the emergency room, covered with a white sheet. The fluorescent lights above flickered continuously. The air felt unnaturally cold even though the air conditioner was turned off. I pulled the sheet back to check the identification. Underneath was a young woman, around 20 years old. Pale skin, purple lips, long black hair still dripping wet. The strange thing was that there was no identification bracelet on her wrist. I called out toward the hallway. "No name?" One nurse answered quickly. "We don't know yet. The police are still identifying her." I looked closer. There were no wounds on her body. No blood. No bruises. No signs of an accident. Only her eyes. Her eyes were slightly open, as if staring at me. I pulled the sheet back over her and pushed the stretcher toward the basement. The city hospital morgue was much larger than most others. It had 2 main cold rooms and a long hallway lit by harsh white lights. At night, the place was so silent that even the sound of stretcher wheels echoed eerily. I opened cold room number 2. The moment I wheeled the body inside, I felt something was wrong. Normally, corpses were cold and stiff. But when I touched the young woman's hand, her skin felt soft. Soft like someone asleep. I jerked my hand away in shock. Then laughed nervously at myself. Maybe she had only died recently. I pulled open drawer number 12 and prepared to transfer her body inside. At that exact moment, I heard breathing. Very faint. I froze. The breathing came again. Not from behind me. From the stretcher. The white sheet was moving slightly up and down. I stepped back, heart racing. Stories of people mistakenly declared dead flashed through my mind. Maybe she was still alive. I rushed forward and pulled away the sheet. The woman still lay motionless. But now her eyes were fully open, staring directly at me. I stumbled backward in terror. Holy shit. Then her lips moved slightly. I leaned closer. A weak voice whispered, "Don't let them lock me inside." My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone to call the emergency ward. But the moment I turned away, something slammed behind me. Bang! I spun around. The body was still lying there. Her eyes were closed again. No breathing. I stood frozen. Maybe exhaustion was making me hallucinate. Trying to calm myself, I quickly transferred her into drawer number 12. Before shutting it, I looked at her one last time. Her face was beautiful. But the look in her eyes earlier, that wasn't the look of a dead person. I shut the drawer. Screech. The moment the metal door locked, I heard scratching. Scratch, scratch? From inside. I ran out of the cold room. For the rest of the shift, I refused to go back inside. Around 3 a.m., I was dozing in the break room when the landline phone rang. It was the emergency ward. "Get down to the basement now." I rushed downstairs. The door to cold room number 2 stood wide open. A forensic doctor stood outside, pale-faced. "Where's the body from drawer number 12? I went numb. Drawer number 12 was empty. I swore I had put the corpse inside. The doctor shouted, "Do you realize how serious it is to lose a body?" Everyone searched the entire basement. Nothing. Security cameras showed nobody entering or leaving. But around 4 a.m., the rear gate security guard called in. Someone had spotted a young woman in a hospital gown standing in the rain behind the hospital. When the guard approached her, she walked toward the abandoned old building nearby. Several of us grabbed flashlights and went searching. The old building was pitch black, with peeling walls and the smell of mold everywhere. It used to be the psychiatric ward before it was shut down. The rain kept growing heavier. We split up. I searched the second floor alone. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I heard water dripping. Drip, drip, drip. At the end of the corridor stood a figure facing away from me. It was the young woman. Her white hospital gown clung to her body from the rain. Her long hair covered her face. I shouted, "Miss." She didn't turn around. I moved closer. When I was only a few feet away, she spoke. "They told everyone I died, didn't they?" I couldn't answer. "You're still alive?" She let out a quiet laugh. A distorted, strange laugh. "No, I'm dead." Then she slowly turned toward me. I nearly screamed. Half of her face was dark purple, the skin peeling like it had been submerged underwater for days. Her left eye was completely white. But the most horrifying thing was the marks around her neck. Deep bruises, like someone had strangled her to death. She stared directly at me. "They killed me." My flashlight flickered violently. At the far end of the hallway, footsteps began echoing. Many footsteps. Clop, clop, clop. I turned around. No one was there. When I looked back, the woman was standing directly in front of me. Her pale face inches from mine. A cold, rotten smell filled my nose. "Do you believe me?" I stumbled backward. Her freezing hand grabbed my wrist. "Don't let them take me back to the cold room." At that moment, my flashlight went out. In the darkness, I heard something crawling across the floor. Fingernails scraping against tiles. Scratch, scratch? I turned on my phone flashlight. And what I saw haunted me forever. The hallway floor was filled with people. No, not people. Corpses wearing hospital gowns crawling on their hands and knees through the darkness. Their skin was pale white. Their eyes wide open. Their mouths hanging open unnaturally. Every single one of them was crawling toward me. I screamed and ran. Footsteps and scratching sounds chased after me. I tumbled down the stairs and sprinted back outside into the rain. When the others saw me panicking, they grabbed me. I told them there were dead bodies in the abandoned building. But when the group searched the place again, nothing was there. No woman. No footprints. No corpses. Only rainwater running through the dark hallway. The next morning, the police arrived at the hospital. They identified the young woman. Her name was Thao. She had been missing for over a week. Her family said she worked at a bar. Her cause of death had initially been listed as drug overdose. But when the forensic doctor re-examined the body, they found clear strangulation marks. She hadn't died from drugs. She had been murdered. The case was immediately reopened. 1 month later, the police arrested the killer. It was her boyfriend. He confessed to strangling her and throwing her body into the river. The current carried her corpse for days before it was discovered. After the case was closed, everyone thought the nightmare was over. But it wasn't. 1 week later, the forensic doctor responsible for the examination was found dead inside his office. The door had been locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. When they broke the door open, he was lying on the floor with his eyes wide open. His own fingernails had torn his throat bloody. And written on the mirror in water were the words, "You said I died naturally." The death was ruled a suicide caused by stress. But everyone who worked night shifts in the morgue knew the truth. Before he died, the doctor had falsified the autopsy report to help the killer escape punishment. After that incident, strange things began happening in the basement morgue. The security cameras would lose signal around 3 a.m. Drawer number 12 opened by itself. Water puddles appeared on the floor despite no leaks anywhere. And many workers heard a woman crying inside the cold room. Some even claimed to see a young woman in a hospital gown standing in the hallway, soaked wet, bruises covering her neck. But the most horrifying thing happened to me 3 months later. That night, I was asleep when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. At first there was only static. Then a soft female voice whispered, "Do you still remember me?" My blood ran cold. It was the woman from the cold room. I tried to hang up, but she continued, "There's someone new inside drawer number 12 now." The call disconnected. At that same moment, my phone received a photo. A picture taken inside the morgue. Drawer number 12 was open. And someone was lying inside it. It was me. Story 3. The bell from freezer drawer number 4. When I was 27 years old, I got a job maintaining refrigeration systems at Fuokan Hospital. Most of the work involved repairing air conditioners, oxygen systems, and checking the morgue freezers. I didn't believe in ghosts. At least not before I encountered freezer drawer number 4. The hospital morgue was located in basement level B2, even deeper underground than the parking garage. To get there, staff had to use a separate elevator. New employees usually hated going down because the place was unnaturally cold, no matter how hot it was outside. On my first day, the department supervisor took me to inspect the refrigeration system. As we passed the row of stainless steel freezer drawers, he stopped in front of drawer number 4 and said, "This drawer's alarm bell keeps malfunctioning, but whatever you do, don't inspect it after midnight." I laughed. "It's just a broken bell." He didn't laugh back. "Just remember what I said." I looked carefully at drawer number 4. Unlike the others, its handle looked older. Deep scratch marks covered the edges of the stainless steel, as if someone had clawed at it from inside. Above it hung a small red warning bell. The system was simple. If the temperature rose abnormally or the drawer opened, the bell would ring. But strangely, even when the entire system functioned perfectly, drawer number 4's bell still rang every single night. I assumed it was a sensor malfunction. Until my second week working there. That night, around 12:17 a.m., the engineering office received an alarm signal from the morgue. I was on duty, so I had to go check it. The moment the elevator doors opened on B2, I heard the bell. Ring, ring, ring. The sound echoed through the empty hallway. The morgue was darker than usual. Half the hallway lights were off. Only cold white light flickered faintly at the far end of the freezer rows. The bell came from drawer number 4. I walked over and checked the control panel. The temperature was stable. The drawer was locked. There was no electrical fault. Yet the bell continued ringing. Ring, ring, ring. The sound wasn't loud, but in the silence it felt unbearable. I opened the electrical panel behind the drawer to inspect the wires. Just as I bent down, I heard something inside the freezer. Knock. I froze. Silence. Then another sound. Knock, knock. Like someone lightly tapping from inside. Goosebumps spread across my skin, but I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was just the metal reacting to the cold. I continued working. Suddenly the bell stopped. The entire basement fell silent. I sighed in relief. Then, a voice spoke behind me. "Can you open the door?" I spun around. No one was there. The long hallway stretched empty beneath flickering white lights. I told myself I had imagined it. Then the voice came again. Very close. "Please, I'm so cold." My whole body stiffened. The voice came from inside drawer number 4. I stepped backward. The bell suddenly rang wildly. Ring, ring, ring. The hallway lights flickered violently. Then, the handle of drawer number 4 slowly moved. It was opening by itself. Terrified, I grabbed the handle to hold it shut. The instant my hand touched the metal, freezing cold shot up my arm. And I heard breathing inside. Not machine noise. Human breathing. A woman's breathing. Slow. Heavy. Right behind the steel door. I jerked my hand away like I'd been electrocuted. The bell abruptly stopped. The lights stabilized. Everything became silent again. As if nothing had happened. I immediately returned to the engineering office and told my supervisor everything. His face turned pale. He locked the office door and asked, "What exactly did it say to you?" I repeated the words. He sat silently for a long moment before opening a drawer and taking out an old file. Inside was an accident report from 8 years earlier. A female intern named Lan had accidentally been locked inside freezer drawer number 4. That night the morgue was overcrowded after a major bus crash. Bodies were arriving non-stop. Lan had been helping check the numbering of the drawers. Nobody realized she climbed inside drawer number 4 to repair the light bulb. An orderly thought the drawer was empty and shut it. The automatic lock engaged. And nobody heard her pounding because the warning bell system was malfunctioning that night. They found her the next morning. Frozen to death. What made my blood run cold was the report stating that before she died, Lan had clawed the inner freezer door until her fingernails bled. And in the final audio recording captured by the hallway microphone, she kept crying and repeating, "Please open the door, I'm so cold." I swallowed hard. So the bell? My supervisor stared toward the basement. It started ringing after Lan died. I forced a nervous laugh. It could still be an electrical problem. He replied, "We replaced the entire system 3 times already." After that day, I started noticing strange things around drawer number 4. Every night at exactly 12:17 a.m., the bell rang. Even if the power was disconnected. The camera facing drawer number 4 always lost signal at that exact time. And night shift workers often heard a woman crying in the hallway. Some employees quit after only a few weeks. But I still tried to explain everything logically. Until the night I saw her myself. A heavy storm caused a power outage throughout basement B2. I had to go down to inspect the breakers. When the elevator doors opened, the basement was pitch black. Only red emergency lights blinked faintly. The bell rang again. Ring, ring, ring. I walked down the hallway with a flashlight. The air was far colder than usual. My breath turned into white mist. As I approached drawer number 4, my flashlight began flickering. Then I saw something standing at the far end of the hallway. A woman in a white medical coat. Long hair covering her face. Head lowered. I froze. "Who's there?" She didn't answer. The bell rang faster. Ring, ring, ring. I took a step backward. The woman began moving toward me. Not walking. Dragging her feet. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Water dripped from her hair onto the floor. When she came within a few feet, she raised her head. Her face was pale blue. Her lips dark purple. Her eyes bloodshot and wide open. And dried blood covered her fingernails. I recognized her instantly. It was Lan. She stared at me and pointed toward drawer number 4. There's still someone inside. At that moment, violent banging exploded from inside the freezer. Bang, bang, bang. Panicking, I grabbed the handle and yanked the drawer open. A cloud of freezing mist burst out. Inside, at the far end of the compartment, someone was curled up. A young orderly who had gone missing 2 days earlier. He was still alive. His lips were blue. His eyes rolled back from the cold. After they dragged him out, he kept repeating the same sentence. She told me to hide in here. That orderly later lost his mind. He claimed every night he saw a female intern standing beside his bed. She would ask, "Are you cold?" After that incident, the hospital decided to remove the entire old freezer system. Drawer number 4 was dismantled first. But while workers were transporting it away, something horrifying happened. The warning bell suddenly rang. Even though every electrical wire had already been cut. One worker curiously looked inside the drawer. The next second, he screamed and fell backward. Others rushed over and asked what he had seen. Shaking violently, he answered, "There was a woman sitting inside." But when everyone looked, the drawer was empty. The worker quit his job the next day. And freezer drawer number 4 was supposedly destroyed. At least that's what the hospital claimed. 3 years later, I left the hospital and worked for a private refrigeration company. One evening, our company received a contract to repair a freezer system at another hospital in a different province. When I entered the basement to inspect the equipment, my heart nearly stopped. At the end of the shiny new stainless steel drawers was an old freezer covered in deep scratch marks. Above it hung the same red warning bell. And faintly etched into the metal corner was the number 4. Then, at exactly 12:17 a.m., the bell began to ring. Story 4. The Night Shift Morgue Keeper. I met Old Man Sao in 2018. At the time, I worked as a reporter for a local newspaper that specialized in crime stories and strange incidents in rural areas. People said there was a morgue keeper at Dong Bin District Hospital who had worked there for more than 20 years but had never dared enter the cold room after 1 a.m. I didn't believe it. Until I met him. Old Man Sao was around 60 years old. Thin, hunched over, with dark skin stained by cigarette smoke and sleepless nights. His guardroom stood beside the old morgue behind the hospital. Inside there was only an old electric fan, a wooden table, and a small altar against the wall. What caught my attention most were the many brass wind chimes hanging on the altar. I asked, "You really like wind chimes?" He stared at me for a long moment before replying, "They're not for listening." "Then what are they for?" He lit a cigarette, his hand trembling slightly. "To know when something walks out of the cold room." I laughed, thinking he was just trying to scare me for a good story. But that night, I was the one who insisted on staying with him. Around 11 p.m., the hospital gradually became quiet. In the distance, ambulance sirens occasionally echoed and faded away. The Dong Bin morgue was very old. The walls were stained and peeling. The hallway lights glowed dim yellow. The steel door of the cold room was rusted in several places. The air around the place felt unnaturally cold even though the night was humid and hot. Old Man Sao handed me a cup of tea and said, "If someone calls your name later, don't answer." I asked, "Who would call me?" He looked toward the morgue. "The ones inside." I still thought he was superstitious. Until exactly 12:40 a.m. A sudden freezing wind blew through the hallway. The wind chimes on the altar gently rattled. Clink, clink. Old Man Sao immediately lifted his head. His face turned pale. "It came out early tonight." Before I could ask what it meant, the sound of dragging slippers echoed from the end of the hallway. Shuffle, scrape, shuffle, scrape. The footsteps were slow, heavy, like someone with wet feet dragging themselves across the tiles. I pointed my flashlight down the corridor. The hallway was empty. but the footsteps kept getting closer. Old Man Sao suddenly stood up, pulled out a bundle of incense sticks from the drawer, and lit them. I laughed nervously. "You're serious?" He didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the cold room door. Then, click. The steel doorknob slowly turned by itself. The door gradually creaked open. A cloud of icy mist drifted outward. The dragging footsteps stopped. The silence became unbearable. I kept trying to tell myself someone from the hospital must be walking around nearby. But then I saw water. A streak of black water slowly flowed out from inside the cold room and across the hallway floor. Old Man Sao's voice trembled. "Don't look inside." Of course, I ignored him. I stepped closer to the doorway. And the moment I looked through the opening, I saw someone standing in the darkness. Very tall. Thin as a skeleton. Head lowered. Long hair hanging over the face. The figure wore an old yellowed hospital gown. Before I could react, it moved. Its head slowly lifted. Beneath the wet hair was the pale green face of a woman with completely white eyes. Her mouth opened unnaturally wide. Wide enough to nearly tear at the corners. Then she spoke. "Old Man Sao." I stumbled backward. Old Man Sao shouted, "Don't answer it." But the woman continued calling. "Old Man Sao, give me back my child." At that exact moment, every wind chime on the altar began shaking violently. Clink, clink, clink. Freezing wind filled the hallway. The lights flickered wildly. I turned toward Old Man Sao. His face looked white as death. He muttered, "That's impossible, it's been 3 years." Then he grabbed me and dragged me into the guardroom, locking the door tightly behind us. Outside in the hallway, the sound of dragging slippers resumed. Shuffle, scrape, shuffle, scrape. It was circling the room. Each step accompanied by dripping water. Drip, drip, drip. I demanded, "Who is that?" Old Man Sao didn't answer immediately. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Years ago, a pregnant woman died during childbirth." The footsteps outside suddenly stopped. He stared at the door before continuing in a quieter voice. "The baby died too. Her family hadn't arrived yet, so the bodies were brought down to the cold room." I listened silently. That night there was a storm. The power went out. I was the only one on duty. He swallowed hard. Around 1 a.m., I heard a woman crying inside the cold room. The scratching sound suddenly came from outside the door. Scratch, scratch? Like fingernails scraping wood. Old Man Sao continued. When I opened the door, she was standing beside the freezer drawer, holding her baby. My spine went cold. She was already dead? He nodded. I got scared and ran. The scratching outside grew louder. Next morning, they found the freezer drawer wide open. The mother's body was lying on the floor. And the baby? He remained silent for a very long time. Then quietly answered, "Gone." The wind outside grew stronger. A woman's soft laughter echoed through the hallway. I began regretting staying there. Then suddenly, a baby started crying. Very close. Right outside the door. The weak cry of a newborn infant. Old Man Sao immediately dropped to his knees before the altar, whispering prayers. I looked through the crack in the door. And what I saw froze my entire body. A woman stood in the hallway. It was her. She held a bundle of white cloth in her arms. Black water dripped from her hair onto the floor. She gently rocked the bundle as if lulling a child to sleep. Then slowly, she turned toward the crack where I was watching. Her white eyes widened. Her mouth twisted into a distorted smile. "Have you seen my child?" I stumbled backward. At that moment, the baby's crying suddenly turned into laughter. High-pitched laughter echoed through the hallway. The lights inside the room went out instantly. Darkness swallowed everything. I heard water dripping right beside my ear. Drip. Then a woman whispered, "Give me back my child." I screamed and switched on my phone flashlight. The beam illuminated. The woman standing directly in front of me. Her face so close I could smell the cold rotten scent of stagnant water. The bundle in her arms began moving. Then a tiny hand emerged from the white cloth. Purple skin. Black fingernails. I collapsed backward in terror. Old Man Sao rushed forward and threw the burning incense toward her. Instantly the lights came back on. The hallway was empty. Only the faint ringing of the wind chimes remained. I gasped for breath, my body frozen cold. But the worst thing had not happened yet. Around 3 a.m., hospital security called to say a new body had arrived. A highway accident victim. Old Man Sao and I went outside to receive it. When the body bag was opened, Old Man Sao suddenly froze. Inside was a young woman. Her face looked exactly like the woman we had just seen in the hallway. Except for one thing. She was still alive. Barely. Doctors immediately rushed her upstairs to emergency care. Before they wheeled her away, the woman suddenly grabbed Old Man Sao's hand. She whispered, "Where's my baby?" Old Man Sao turned pale. A few hours later, the woman died during surgery. The strange thing was that her medical records showed she had never given birth. She had never even been pregnant. But while changing her clothes, nurses discovered old surgical scars covering her stomach, as if something had once been cut out of her body. After that night, Old Man Sao quit his job. 1 month later, he was found dead in a small rented room near the bus station. He sat before an altar filled with wind chimes. His eyes were wide open. And on the wall, written in black water stains, were the words, "Give me back my child." I never returned to Dongbin Hospital again. But sometimes, during stormy nights when the wind rattles my windows, I still hear wind chimes ringing faintly outside. Clink, clink, along with the slow sound of dragging slippers. Shuffle, scrape, shuffle, scrape, and someone standing outside my door, lulling a baby to sleep. Story 5. The final surgery in the basement. I have never told this story to anyone. Not because I was afraid people wouldn't believe me, but because every time I remember it, I dream of that corpse opening its eyes and staring at me in the dark. In 2020, I was a resident doctor at Dai Phong Hospital, a well-known private hospital on the outskirts of the city. On the surface, the place looked modern, clean, and luxurious, but beneath the main building, in the basement, there was an old section that never appeared on any hospital map. The old surgical wing. And the morgue. People said that before the hospital was renovated, a terrible medical accident had happened there. After the incident, the entire basement was sealed off. I didn't believe in superstition. Until the night I was called down there. That night, around 1 a.m., the emergency ward received a young woman involved in a severe traffic accident. She was around 25 years old and had lost an enormous amount of blood. Her heart had stopped on the way to the hospital. The doctors attempted resuscitation for nearly 40 minutes without success. The official time of death was declared at 1:43 a.m. I was the one who signed the report. But just as the nurses were preparing to transfer the body to the morgue, the hospital lights suddenly flickered. The entire emergency ward went dark for a few seconds before the power returned. And at that exact moment, the heart monitor suddenly beeped. Beep, beep, beep. A heartbeat appeared. Everyone stood frozen. One doctor immediately checked her pupils. She still had no reflexes. No breathing. Her body was ice cold. Yet the monitor continued showing a pulse. Very slow. Very weak. The head doctor frowned. "Take her down to the basement for another examination," I asked. "To the morgue?" He looked at me for a moment before replying. "No, the old operating room." I had never heard of that operating room before. But as a new resident doctor, I had no right to ask questions. Around 2 a.m., I followed the head doctor and 2 nurses as we transported the woman to the basement using the service elevator. When the doors opened, a damp smell mixed with old disinfectant hit us immediately. The hallway down there was much darker than the upper floors. The neon lights flickered continuously. Paint peeled from the walls. At the far end stood a steel door with faded words painted across it. Old surgical wing, authorized personnel only. The feeling of unease began growing inside me. The head doctor unlocked the door. Inside was an old operating room covered in dust. Yet strangely, every machine still functioned. The surgical lights turned on. The monitors powered up, as if the room was still regularly used. We placed the young woman onto the operating table. That was when I noticed something wrong. Her skin was no longer cold. It was becoming warm. One nurse whispered shakily, "Doctor, I think she's still alive." The head doctor said nothing. He only stared at the monitor. The heartbeat had become clearer. Beep, beep. But the horrifying thing was, although the monitor displayed a heartbeat, the woman's chest never moved. No breathing. No signs of life. I looked at the head doctor. He quietly said, "Prepare for surgery." I froze. What surgery? He looked at me with cold eyes. "We're removing the thing inside her." Before I could understand what he meant, he pulled down the woman's hospital gown. Instantly my blood ran cold. Her stomach was swollen unnaturally. Not bloated like a normal corpse. Something was moving underneath the skin. Again and again. As if something were crawling inside her body. One nurse burst into tears. "Oh my God!" the head doctor shouted. "Quiet." Then he turned toward me. "If you want to keep working at this hospital, stand still and watch." I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The head doctor picked up a scalpel. The instant the blade touched her stomach, the woman's eyes snapped open. Completely white. Her mouth stretched unnaturally wide. And a hoarse voice emerged. "Don't let it out." I screamed and stumbled backward. But the head doctor continued slicing into her stomach. Black blood poured out. Not red. Thick black liquid like oil. The stench filled the operating room. Suddenly the lights flickered violently. The heart monitor screamed. Beep. Then, something moved beneath the opened flesh. A tiny hand emerged from the incision. Its skin was pale white. Its fingernails were unnaturally long. One nurse fainted instantly. I stood frozen in terror. The hand continued crawling outward. Then the head appeared. But what emerged was not a baby. It had the shape of an infant, but its entire body was covered in black slime. Its eyes were completely white. Its mouth was filled with tiny sharp teeth. It crawled across the woman's stomach like a spider. And it was smiling. Its shrill laughter echoed through the operating room. The head doctor stumbled backward, pale-faced. He muttered, "That's impossible, we burned it last time." I stared at him. "You know what that thing is?" Before he could answer, the creature suddenly leapt onto the ceiling. So fast my eyes could barely follow it. The surgical lights shook violently. A loud crash echoed from the hallway. The operating room door slammed shut. Locked. The creature crawled across the ceiling, twisting its head downward to stare at us. Then it spoke in a child's voice. "Where's my mother?" At that exact moment, the woman on the operating table began convulsing violently. Her mouth stretched open so far it nearly dislocated her jaw. Then another voice came from her throat. Not a woman's voice. An old man's voice. It was never dead. The head doctor backed into the corner, trembling. "I burned it." The creature on the ceiling laughed. "Liar." Suddenly every light in the room went out. Only the red glow of the heart monitor remained. In that dim light, I saw the creature scuttle rapidly toward the head doctor. He screamed. A horrifying scream I still hear in my nightmares. Then blood splattered across the walls. When the lights came back on, the head doctor lay on the floor. His throat had been ripped open. His eyes rolled back. And the creature was gone. The woman on the operating table was gone too. Only black blood streaks remained across the floor leading into the hallway. The remaining nurse and I ran outside. The basement corridor was pitch black. Children's laughter echoed everywhere. At the far end of the hallway near the morgue, I saw the woman standing there. Her stomach hung open. Black blood dripped down her legs. She cradled the small creature in her arms like a child. She looked at me and smiled. Doctor? Her voice echoed coldly. Can you hear it crying? Immediately, the sound of crying babies filled the basement. Dozens. No. Hundreds of crying voices at once. Every morgue drawer began shaking violently. Bang, bang, bang. As if countless things inside were trying to get out. I ran toward the elevator. Children's laughter chased behind me. As the elevator doors closed, I saw one final image. The woman standing in the dark hallway. Around her, dozens of tiny children crawled across the floor. All of them lifted their heads to stare at me. And smiled. The next morning, the hospital announced that the head doctor had died of a stroke while working. Nobody mentioned the young woman again. Her medical records disappeared completely. The basement level was permanently sealed. 1 month later, the hospital renovated the entire morgue area. But night shift workers still whisper that sometimes around 2 a.m. the service elevator will stop at the basement level by itself, even when nobody presses the button. And if the doors open, people will see a woman in a hospital gown standing in the dark hallway. Her stomach ripped open. A black infant in her arms. And if you hear it crying, never answer. Because once it knows you can hear it, it will follow you home.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.